to be successful, you have to have a good work ethic. I know that there's always a lot of emphasis on talent, but if you showed me two folks and one had a better work ethic, I think that person probably wins out 95% of the time.
You're listening to the Building Better Futures podcast, where innovation meets inspiration. In each episode, host Eric Hirani journeys alongside notable thought leaders who are shaping the future, cultivating exceptional work cultures, and nurturing the next generation of trailblazers. We aim to spark inspiration by engaging in dialogue with leaders from groundbreaking companies, innovative projects, and exceptional teams. Our goal is to empower individuals to positively impact those around them and leave a lasting legacy of positive change in our communities and society at large. Let's dive in together and explore what it takes to build better futures, one conversation at a time.
Today, I'm excited to be joined by Michael Vardaro, managing partner at Zetlin De Chiara. Hey, Mike, how are you?
Hey, Eric. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
No, thank you for being on. And I know we're going to talk a lot about the incredible projects and some of the cases you've been a part of. And so I appreciate you taking time out of your busy day. I can only imagine how hard that is. So let's get started. And we always start with the section on good news and gratitude. Is there like any particular good news or gratitude you'd share with me in the audience?
Well, being someone in New York, I guess we got to start off with the Knicks, right? I mean, that goes without saying. It's been a long time coming, and hopefully they can keep it going. And I'm sure we'll get into it, but there is a little bit more of a connection because I'm not the biggest NBA fan. But that, and I guess on a more serious note, I certainly am always thankful for the opportunities that we have to serve our clients because we work with just great folks, and we never for a minute take for granted an opportunity to help a client. And a lot of times they come to us when, what's hitting the fan. So, we never take that for granted and always cherish the opportunity to help them out.
Well, one, I would say the Knicks are as serious business as anything. So super excited about that. I know by the time this airs, the finals will be over and hopefully we'll have raised the trophy. But for those that are listening to make this contemporaneous, 2 days ago, the Knicks won Game 4, swept the Cavs. It was amazing, electric. And because you brought up the Knicks, my gratitude, and it's at the point when this airs, it'll be long past, but my gratitude is I had a friend whose brother couldn't make it to Game 1, so she invited me, and so I was there for the 22-point comeback, and it was the most electric thing I've ever been a part of. It was so cool, and
That's great.
so I hope we don't all regret this gratitude, 3 months from now.
Yeah.
But no, that team looks good. I hope they can win it all. And
doesn't mean a whole lot unless they can win it all, right?
Yeah. So that's what we're hoping for. But to your point about just servicing your clients and you guys have done a great job of building an incredible reputation in the industry. And I know you work with a lot of great clients. And, I'd say the greatest testament to that is if you are in a room and people are like, well, who's your attorney? And, they say, hey, Zetlin De Chiara does the best work for me. And that's a testament to what you guys are doing, even when you're not in the room. So thank you for bringing that up. And it's amazing that you have the opportunity to serve such great clients. Let's talk about you a little bit. Give me your 90-second to 2-minute bio. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? I know you have a little bit of a unique background into how you became an attorney, so I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that so the audience can hear about that. And then, tell us a little bit about life today.
Yeah, so I do have a little bit of a different story. Never once did I ever think I was going to become a lawyer. So I grew up my one grandfather had worked in construction. My other grandfather was a machinist who ended up working on the Manhattan Project during World War II, which for the younger people that don't know what that is, it was basically the development of the nuclear weapons in World War II. And then my father was an engineer, worked on large power generation facilities all over the world. So it kind of was it was in my DNA. And from as long as I can remember, I just loved construction. I loved the science behind it, behind building things. And I started out as a just a laborer. I was wheelbarrowing concrete and swinging a hammer, and ended up being a framer with my own crew. I did go to Villanova, so
Oh,
that's my
wow.
Knicks connection, and went to Nova. Got a degree in civil engineering with a focus in structural engineering. I was fortunate enough to play football while I was there, and which kind of taught me a little bit of time management skills. And then I got out of school, and I was a little confused as to what I wanted to do. Funny enough, when I got out, one of the jobs I interviewed with was a company that was going to be designing the Second Avenue subway. And, that's something that just kind of, the Second Avenue subway extension that just hit a couple years ago. I mean, it's amazing how long it took.
Yeah.
And, I was a little not sure that that's what I wanted to do. So I ended up going to law school with the idea that I would get kind of on the management side of engineering and construction. And during my law school days, I had one of the alumni from my school reached out to me and said, "Hey, I saw your background. Why don't you come work with us for the summer?" I did that, and I kind of got hooked. I was doing a lot of litigation in the beginning, and someone getting out of college, I was used to playing sports, and litigation was a lot like sports. Instead of using your brawn, right, you're using your brain. And I kind of got hooked, and I guess it's about 28 years later, and here I am. So that's kind of my story, which, I think is something that, especially in this day and age with folks trying to figure out what they want to do. I mean, sometimes people know what they want to do from the start. For me, I thought I knew what I wanted to do, but always be open to change, right?
It's so I have a couple of things I want to just talk about there. One was you said you never thought you'd be an attorney, and it's so weird because like I still to this day I tell my wife all the time, I'm like, you know what, when I have the time, I'm gonna go back to law school because I think it's just such an interesting art. And maybe it has something to do with what you said. It's like it's almost like how can I use the knowledge I have in a way that beats the other person's knowledge, right? Because the set of knowledge is the same. We all have the same set of facts potentially and the same set of case law, right, to work from. It's just a matter of like how do I think this through? And I just love the history of law, so I'm a big history guy, which is the second point I want to make. If anyone listening to the show is not familiar with the Manhattan Project, you need to go learn some history because history is doomed to repeat itself, and you've got to be aware where we all came from. The decisions that were made that brought us here. Um, Most importantly, I want to talk about. So you started out, you said, as a laborer. Was that like in high school or college, or was that when? What was like? How old are you?
Yeah, I probably shouldn't say how old I was because I don't know if it
If it
was
was legal?
legitimate at that point. But I was swinging a hammer back, before nail guns, and I remember like I couldn't move my hand. I thought something drastically happened to it the first day I ever worked, and yeah, so I kind of one of the things that I think I've been really fortunate in my career was like on the construction side. I started off as the low of the low, and ended up when I left to go to law school, I had my own framing crew. So I was the head of the crew. Much like law, I mean, I started with Zetlin De Chiara back in 1999. And on the hierarchy, I was the lowest attorney, right? And so it's kind of, I think it's important, right? Because when you see, especially in construction, when you know how things get done, and when I say get done, like really get done on site, right? It helps you, it helps me today, because when I hear something about something that happened, let's say on a project, I can say, I'm going to call what on that, because
Yeah.
that's definitely not the way it happened, and sometimes it can help. So, yeah, I've been really fortunate to kind of like work at the different levels. And I think it's kind of it's certainly helped me throughout my career.
No, I think that's it's really great to have both perspectives. My dad, who you also know, always said that to us growing up. He's like, you could be an engineer, you could be in management, you could do whatever you want. First step is to be on a construction site. And like one of my first jobs was, and my dad calls it like, and maybe everyone does, but the dumb end of the stick. Like, you'd be surveying. So I'm not the one good enough to read the left. I'm only good enough to hold the rod on this side. And, but work your way up because you really need to know what they're going through in order to have like any sense of what you're designing or managing or trying to build. So I know you mentioned that it was kind of like you got into law and, it felt like a little bit about sports, but was there like a defining moment there that you were just like, hey, construction law is really what's for me. This is what I'm going to do with the rest of my life.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was after the fact, though, right? So it wasn't that that's what I wanted to do. It was once I started doing it, I said, wow, this is great stuff. Fortunately for us and for what we do, we work with great clients. So we work on incredible projects all over the country. And there have been a number of times where they're just massive projects with massive disputes, and you really get to deep dive into some aspect of that project on a forensic level. So maybe it's a structural engineering issue, or maybe it's a mechanical engineering issue, but we're able to get into a level of detail that a lot of engineers don't, right? Because we've got the experts in the world, right? Like the top-notch guys and gals that help explain to us what's really happening. And we really look at things and really understand kind of the science of how it works. And then we take that and we kind of layer on that, right? Being a good lawyer and doing everything that we need to do to advance the arguments of our clients.
Very cool. Well, so let's, obviously it's an ever evolving landscape. Delivery methods are changing, technology's changing, all these different things. What are you seeing as the big illegal risks like AEC firms are facing today, And maybe I'd even ask you, like, have they kind of changed, Like, do you see any changes in your career on what the biggest legal risks have been?
I don't think so. I think it's a really simple answer, which is communication. To me, when you look at disputes, right? Because we do a lot of work on kind of the contracting side and I'll say the productive side. The litigation side isn't necessarily productive. And so when you get into disputes, if you kind of try to distill it down, how did these parties get there? Most times communication is involved, whether it be that there's an expectation that was missed, whether a contractor or a design professional failed to really get the owner or developer to understand what was happening. Sometimes it's within the parties, right? A design team doesn't let the subcontractors know exactly what they want, or vice versa. Now, of course, with all the specialized design, we've got designers that come in through the subcontractors, right? So we've got the detailers that come in. And so there's all this communication that goes on. And so oftentimes what we find is that that's really at the heart of the dispute. I don't think that that's really changed, although the way it happens has certainly changed and is continuing to change, and I think especially in today's day and age with all of the advanced tools, I think some folks kind of get this feeling that, well, it's easy to communicate because we don't have to worry about it because all of that communication is getting done, and nothing could be further from the truth.
That's really interesting. And so, in those like communication breakdowns, is that when you say too much communication, like, is it because there's too many channels now where information gets passed, or, why do you feel that there's too much communication maybe, but it's working towards the party's help,
Yeah,
like
so
towards the project progress?
yeah, I think a good example, Eric, right, is what us lawyers get asked all the time is, should we be using, if we're on a Zoom, should we be using this AI note taker, right? And it's great because you don't have to take notes. I mean, who likes to take notes?
Yeah.
And it comes out and it's good, right? Well, not exactly, because the devil's in the details. And a lot of times with those note takers, it doesn't necessarily capture what happened on that meeting. It may get 85% of it correct, but the 15% that it gets incorrect, I can tell you, usually what happens is it's that piece that is at issue later on. And the reason is because, one word could mean a lot of difference, and it doesn't quite appreciate that. And what happens when someone gets those notes, they don't look at it, right?
Yeah.
And it just sits there, and now that becomes the story. Very different than, let's say, if you took a transcript from the meeting, and maybe the transcript, there were some sentences where it just didn't hear the person talking and it didn't record it perfectly, but it doesn't change some of the facts. And that's really the issue. So that's a good example where we've got lots more data than we ever had, yet that doesn't necessarily mean that it's better. And that's the problem, because so that AI note document is then sent to another party. The other party reads it, but the party that's sending it probably never read it. And so they're sending a message that's incorrect now. And so all of a sudden we've got a communication gap.
Yeah, we talk about that a lot internally. I mean, AI is a tool, but the human intervention cannot be skipped, right? Like the review, the audit, the processing, the gut, even just like the gut check, right? Like, these tools hallucinate. They'll make things up. I mean, it's very possible. And since we're talking about AI, like what, the note taking is one option, but what else concerns you about how firms are like kind of currently adopting AI, and any suggestions you have on the use of the tools? Because there's also a fear that if you're not using them, you're going to fall behind, right? I mean, they are moving so quickly, and while they're not 100% accurate, the accuracy is pretty good. They're very capable. So what are your biggest like concerns, or what do you advise your clients on how to use these AI tools?
I think the key in the question was the use of the word tools, right? It's a tool, which is what it is. And I think what happens is you have issues when people think AI is no longer a tool, it's a replacement for someone, right? And that's really where we get into trouble. I think for folks adopting it, yes, I would agree, right? I mean, we all have to do that, whether we're a business person, a lawyer, contractor, engineer. You've got to use it. I mean, that's just the way it is. I mean, I remember back years ago, I was getting out of engineering school. And in engineering school, I took a mechanical drafting class. But by the time I was out, everything was on CAD. And I remember back then people saying, well, the engineering community is going to hemorrhage jobs because you used to have these massive floors in buildings with all the drafters. And all of a sudden that's going to get thrown out and all these people are going to lose their jobs to CAD. And what really happened? That never happened. What really happened was that now those engineers are freed up to do some of the designs that we look at the New York City skyline. You couldn't do those designs 30 years ago, right? So I think AI is just the next iteration. Is it much more powerful? Yeah, absolutely, right? But it's something that it will allow professionals to do more of what they should be doing. But you've got to make sure you've got proper controls on it, right? So I think it's in part making sure that employees understand what your expectations are as a company, right? You want to allow them to use it, give them the tools, and set up some guidelines, set up the processes through which you're going to use it, right? Don't shy away from it. Don't ignore it, right? It's going to happen. They're going to use it. So embrace that and try to help them to use it correctly. I think it's exciting, especially for the construction industry, right? Because there's a lot of programs out there that can really help the process, right? I mean, the construction industry as a whole typically gets this knock about the fact that efficiency hasn't increased
Yep.
to the same level as other industries. And in part, that's because every time we build something in the construction industry, it's a one-off, right? If you're building an Apple phone, you can perfect that in some clean space where they're putting the chips in and they're doing everything and it's all automated. It's very different when we're doing what we're doing.
No, I know, but there's that infamous graph, right? All the other industries are like blown away, and I think construction is like it's a 3% increase or something. It's like this very small increase. But to your point about the drafting rooms, and it's funny on the last episode we actually talked about what an art that was when people had to really draft by hand. I mean, and we've probably seen some of those tables, but it's gone now. And like you said, I mean, yes, those jobs may have been lost, but it's not like engineers lost their jobs, right? They continue to grow and build, and just using AI as a tool. And so, like, for us, a lot of the challenge has been, or not even challenge, because it hasn't been a challenge because we were ahead of it. But what I've heard from people is kind of like, well, everyone's using their own tools. And like, so we were like, no, we're going to standardize what tools are allowed by the company and what aren't. They're all going to be on corporate licenses. We have an AI use policy, like trying to do everything we can, because otherwise everyone's going to use the tools. And unless you control it, it's just going to be the Wild West.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I think the other point that people really need to focus in on is that AI is super powerful when it has the proper data.
Right.
So it really all comes back to data. So for those involved in construction, you've got to focus in on what data is yours and what data can you use to teach those AI tools how you do what you do so that it can help you do it better moving forward.
Very cool. All right, let's shift back to the litigation side of things, right? And you mentioned you work on some incredible projects, many great firms. What have you seen that like kind of separates the firms that are able to recover well, after litigation, and those that kind of struggle, coming out of litigation?
Recover after, that's an interesting question
I
because
know, because
a
it's two
lot of
different ways you
times
could take that. Yeah.
it's how do you survive it? So yeah, I mean, obviously you want to try to get through a litigation, keep focused, right? It's kind of a distraction to everything else.
Yeah.
But, once you get through it, I think the most important thing is really to learn from that. And yes, there may be some specific issue, but it's more than that. You've got to generalize that and think about internal processes. You've got to think about how do we incentivize our folks to do things that keep us out of litigation? Now, I'm a big proponent that you shouldn't be thinking in that kind of CYA fashion, right? It's not about staying out of litigation. It's how do you do a better job in what you do, whether it's communicating with a client or communicating with others in a construction project. Because if you do those things better, the net effect of it will be that you will avoid disputes, right? And that's really the key. So I think if you can focus and do a better job, then great. And a lot of times what you see is folks kind of make the same mistakes over and over again, and that's really, as a business, something that we can't afford to do, right?
Yeah, I mean, and I think you hit it on the head, right? Like litigation, I mean, are there really any winners or losers? Obviously there are, but at the end of the day, it's like it always ends up being a time suck, a money suck, an energy suck. And even if you recover, and like I have, two I'll call them friends, but people I know who got stuck in major litigation, right? They basically had to shut the businesses down because they just didn't have the capital to keep it going. They did eventually prevail, but in that sense, like who was the winner, right? Yeah, they got their payout 20 years later, from the client, but just like it's unfortunate, And so the goal really is, I guess, just to avoid it, like you're saying.
Yeah, and I think the other important point, right, is to make sure as you're navigating through a litigation, it's not just about legal wins, right? You can win a motion, you can win a decision, but where do you end up, right? Because in your scenario, if someone ultimately was exonerated, yet they had to close down their company, well, that's not really, right?
It's no good. Another place that I find myself going back and forth with my risk manager on, and I don't really understand this very well, so I'm hoping you can shed some light on it, is indemnification language in contracts. What does it actually mean? What are we saying? And like one of the challenges I have, and I don't know how practical this for everyone else, is like sometimes the indemnification language, from my understanding, is like it's uninsurable or just like technically not right. And then, but obviously we have clients who are big players, right? Big major firms. They're like, well, that's the language and we're not changing it. And it's like, okay, I don't know. I don't know what to do here, but he's shed some light on what is the indemnification language and what should architects and engineers like understand about it.
Yeah, when you said that there was an issue, indemnification's definitely in the top three, right? It's definitely up there in everybody's mind. I mean, so in a typical situation, if you have, let's say, an owner, an architect, an engineer, a contractor, and a couple of subcontractors, and they're all on a construction project, and something goes wrong with the project, there's this concept of liability, which everyone is generally familiar with, right? Who is the party that was responsible? There may be multiple parties, right? Usually on a construction project, it's not one thing that happens. There's a couple of different failures, and that's why, right? Because there's lots of checks and balances on a construction project. But when a number of things fall apart, that's when we have an issue. So liability is really just apportioning, okay, who's responsible for these things? The indemnification obligation is something very different, which is to say, despite who's liable, here's who's going to pay. And that's why it's such a big deal. As you said, there are a number of even municipal owners, right? And agencies that have very, very difficult language that they've thrust upon all of the contractors and design professionals. And there's really not a whole lot that you can do because you'll hear from them, well, we don't negotiate it.
Yeah.
Well, but it's uninsurable. So where does that leave me as someone that's trying to do the right thing and help build New York? So that's where we get into these issues. I mean, I think that a lot of the trade organizations and industry organizations have really focused on trying to change some of this language. There's a couple of bills that are always floating around up in Albany and in other states. Usually not a whole lot of progress gets made, but listen, we're always hopeful. But I think it's important to understand that, right? And I think that every provision is different, so it's really hard. But conceptually, it's something. It's this concept that goes beyond just liability and saying, regardless of liability, this is who's paying, and that's why you're correct to say, hey, listen, this is something that I've got to focus on. It's a red flag.
And when you say pay, because I know this also comes up in the conversation, sometimes it's like to pay for the defense, right? Whether or not like it's like you said, you're liable. But are you also talking about like the eventual claim payout? Does that fall on that insurance company then, or is it just about the defense payment
Yeah, so
or
there's
obligation?
correct. There's a couple of pieces of it, right? One is, okay, so if you are providing indemnification to another party, that other party is expecting you to then hire the attorney to go foot all of the expenses to defend, right, that claim. So there's this defense obligation that a lot of times is included, not always, but sometimes. And then there's the other piece, which is, okay, you go to court and you get a decision and the jury says you're responsible for $100. Well, now that party is going to pay that $100.
Oh
So
wow, so it is both.
it is both. it can be both, right? It's all
Well,
about how.
yeah, I know it's, I think you used the phrase earlier, devil's in the details. So it's like, what can you negotiate in and out of the indemnification? And, um, but yeah, so you said that would be top three. What were the other two on your mind, if you had any on your mind?
Well, usually money, right?
Yeah.
How much am I getting paid and what the scope is? Those are two
Oh, okay,
two
sure.
two important pieces, right?
In the contract. So you know what? I will say in our risk, like how we evaluate contracts, those are the top three. It's like, hey, is it the right scope, guys? Are we getting what we bid or, decided was the right cost? And then our risk manager is always like marking up indemnification language. Like, this does not look right. And then sometimes insurance language he marks up too, because he's like, hey, this policy doesn't apply to us. We're not going to have contractors' pollution liability because we're not the contractor.
Right.
So now, same line of thinking in indemnification and liability and stuff. I know the city and the state and just the industry in general, we've gone towards more design build. There's progressive design build now being tested. There's P3 work going on. Have you seen that kind of like shift some of the traditional risks? And have you found it to be better? Have you found it to be more complicated? I know that we don't have as large a data set, but do you have any thoughts on that? Like the alternative delivery models that are starting to make way?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly design build's been around for a while, right? I mean, I think progressive design build has changed some of the design build pieces, right? The idea is to make it better, to kind of fix some of the issues with it. You're right, we don't have a huge sample set, but I think so far it's better than design builds,
Oh,
right?
wow.
Um, one of the things that kind of goes back to what we were talking about before is on the progressive front, what happens a little bit more? There's more communication, right? A lot of times there's even co-location with an
Yep.
owner and the contracting team and the design team all in one location. And so what does that do? It increases communication, which is usually an issue. But yeah, I mean, I guess we'll see how it plays out. Is it really better? Just kind of the scuttlebutt in the industry is that it seems to be better. It certainly provides some better opportunities. So I guess we'll see.
Yeah, no, excited to hear that. I know there's, I think, four, maybe even five ongoing ones that I know of that the public agencies have put out there. There might be some others. But yeah, I think people are hopeful, and I definitely like design build as a potential delivery model, and I think progressive offers some, like you said, opportunities that traditional design build doesn't, especially in the ability to communicate and work with each other before maybe establishing like firm price and moving forward. So
I mean, I
very
think
cool.
one of the things that you see in projects today as compared to those projects that were built 25 years ago is just the pieces are so much more complicated, right? It doesn't matter if it's a tunnel, right? Gateway tunnel, whether it's a skyscraper in Manhattan, a water treatment plant, it doesn't matter what it is, but all of those elements now have become so much more complicated, so much more technology advanced, and incorporating all kinds of other pieces. So you've got kind of this more specialized design element and construction element, right, that follows each of those pieces. So it's really having to coordinate much more people to kind of get something done. And so that's the difficult part. So how do you kind of pull all that together, and how do we get projects to continue to get built? And so it certainly provides a good opportunity.
Yep. Very cool. So, I focus part of this show on leadership, and so I want to talk a little bit about that. I consider you a leader in the industry. I know and a lot of your clients and friends and people you associate with are. So, I just, question, and probably for everybody, but what do you think are the qualities that make someone a good leader, but specifically in the construction industry? And we talked about how our industry may be different from other industries in the way they manufacture or build.
Um, I don't think it's any different than any other industry, right? Maybe there's some specific applications, but I think to be successful, right? Number one, you have to have a good work ethic. I know that there's always a lot of emphasis on talent, but if you showed me two folks and one had a better work ethic, I think that person probably wins out 95% of the time. Um, I think what goes with work ethic, maybe it's not completely exclusive, is having a passion for what you do, right? And so if you have a passion for what you do, it's easier to work harder, obviously, because you love what you do. But that passion piece is important, right? To have that genuine curiosity about learning and what you're doing and having that understanding piece, right? I think it's also one of the pieces that you can't really teach. Maybe you can get a little bit better at it, is this piece that I focus on, which is judgment, right? Because as a professional, you have to have it, and it is judgment. Especially with AI and all these tools, right? Like trying to figure out how, I mean, you look at any great business leader and they're able to make decisions with not all of the information and facts that they really need, right? Because you've got to be swift. And the only way you do that is if you've got good judgment. And I think, part of what goes into that is being humble, right? Always listening to others. I don't care where that employee ranks on the totem pole. You need to listen. I always think about something that I learned a long time ago is distinguishing between a boss and a leader, right? Like a boss, the people are told to follow, and a leader is the person that people choose to follow. And so, when you're focused on kind of communication and your people skills and respect for your employees, like being a leader is kind of what happens. And so to me, those are some of the elements that I think folks should have and to be successful.
I love it. And it's, I'm going to start with the first two you mentioned. And my wife and I just happen to be, I've watched it before, but we're watching Ted Lasso. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's pretty funny. And there's a character in it who's just extremely talented, and they're soccer players, right? But he doesn't have like what you're saying, right? Like he doesn't have the work ethic. He kind of has the passion, but not really. And he's definitely not humble about it. And the coach benches him, and the team wins their first game, and they start to rally as a team. And but that's true in real life, right? Like you need to have that passion, that desire, that work ethic, to really go out and be a good leader. To the second part about the leader versus boss, there's this graphic I love, and it's like leader and boss. And on the boss side, it's like all of the employees are basically carrying him on, like carrying him into whatever, like a procession, right? And on the leader side, it's like the leader is the first one, like, pulling the rope with the rest of the team, like helping him. And for us, we do a lot. I actually don't like the word boss, and I get like kind of uneasy when people say it about me, and like my team knows that. But we love the word coach. Like we are all here as a team to get something done, right? To win. And it's my job to put everyone in a position that they can win, and it's their job to put their team members in a position that they can win, and just like coach them up to be their best selves. So I love that distinction, and I totally agree with you. That's what I wanted to get there.
Yeah,
And
I'll adopt a word that you said, which I didn't include and I should have, which is being a team player. Because there's no way in this industry that you can be successful by yourself.
none of us do it alone.
You've got to be a good team player and a real team player, not just kind of saying what you're supposed to say, right? When you really live that mentality, that's when you can be successful.
So we talked a little bit about litigation. We talked about indemnification. We talked about some challenges. We also talked about some incredible opportunity with AI as technology, the skyscrapers that we're building all over the city, the complex projects we're working on, new delivery method. What gives you optimism for the future of the construction industry?
Well, I would say what gives me optimism is what has happened to date, right? I mean, construction led us through the COVID recovery.
Yep.
We've heard lots of things over the past 5 or 6 years about how, well, construction's going to slow down, and it just keeps, I mean, we just got numbers a couple of weeks ago, and it
Knock on wood.
continues. Yeah. Knock on wood, but we continue to go strong. I mean,
Yeah.
if you really think about it, right, we have to construct. We've got a country that the infrastructure is aging, so we've got to fix that, number one, to get it back to where it was. But number two, we're so far beyond where we used to be, so to upgrade those things, we need to do that. And, if you look at just the way we do things. I mean, whether it's data centers, whether it's everyone shops through Amazon now, and you've got distribution facilities and warehouses. I mean, the list goes on of all these things that we need to do, and the construction industry makes it all happen. So to me, it's a great industry to be a part of, right? I mean, I'm sure you take a lot of satisfaction when you look around and you're driving through the city or the state and you see a project that you worked on, right? You've got some satisfaction that you helped to bring it to life. And so I think there's a lot of optimism when it comes to the industry. I think the biggest concern that I have is, are we getting talented folks?
Yeah.
And I think for a while, right, there was this push that everyone had to go to college. And now all of a sudden I feel like, well, yeah, maybe that is the path, but it's equally as good to become an electrician right now.
Yeah.
Like, and I think that there's this mentality shift that, yeah, you know what? That is a good thing. Like, we're not going to put you below a college graduate. I mean, everyone should do what they want to do. And if we can attract the talent to come into construction, because listen, it's a tough job, but it's super rewarding, right? And if we can do that, I think construction will realize everything that it can realize in the future.
Yep. No, I love the answer. And part of the reason I wanted to do a show like this was to encourage like younger people to learn more about the industry and different perspectives and angles into it, right? Like, you might be an attorney, but you're still construction, I don't even want to say adjacent, like you're in it, right? Your clients are in it and you're working with them closely, probably negotiating contracts, negotiating deals, getting them done, right? In a way. So, and I agree with you, that whole push for everyone to go to college, it's not exactly what everyone needed. And a lot of people, like, an electrician is like a genius. I'm in a bunch of group chats with like friends and family and whatever, and there's always like, hey, does anyone have a good plumber? Like, we can't find a good plumber and we have a problem. And so those are all valuable skill sets, and we definitely need to encourage younger folks to, yes, go to college, but also, pick up trades work and really become artisans, right? Like skilled craftsmen is really what they are. All right, cool. Well, before we jump into our lightning round, I'm just one last question, and it's going to be, if every listener implemented one change after this conversation we just had, what would you want it to be?
Well, I guess it's got to be something that I've said, right? Which is
Doesn't
to
have
be a
to be.
better
Okay.
communicator, because I
Okay.
think that's the low hanging fruit, right? Think about how you communicate. And I think for folks in the construction industry, if you're communicating with a colleague, you can get very detailed, very technical. If you're communicating with a client, that client maybe doesn't understand the subject matter as well as you do. So you have to think of it from their perspective. And that's where I think you can improve communication. So if you're typing an email about choices, give them the choices, right? Lay it out in a way that they're going to understand it. I mean, I think for architectural firms, right, the big thing that they've had with these virtual reality things is that you can explain to a client what the museum's going to look like. You can describe it. You can come up with a beautiful sketch rendering, even in color, or, nowadays with graphics, and come up with something really nice. But we all know it's very different when you walk through it. For a lot of us, we're able to read plans and kind of understand what it's like to navigate through that
Yep.
space. But for a lot of people, that just doesn't happen. So that virtual reality really helps them to experience it and to make changes before it gets built, right? Which is super helpful. So, when you're communicating with folks, try to think in those terms and how are they understanding it? And ask them, like, do you understand what I'm saying? Right? Don't be afraid to have the conversation. There's texts, there's WhatsApp, there's emails. I don't know if people send real letters anymore, right? It's all PDFs, but just pick up the phone, have a conversation, talk to somebody at a project site or an industry event, right? Like that to me is so important.
I love it. Communication, great, great takeaway. And communicate at their level is really what I heard, right? Like make sure they understand what you're communicating. Because if it's just you talking, that's just a one-way street and they're not receiving the message. All right, we do a quick lightning round. This is for fun, top of mind. Don't overthink it, just to get to know you a little bit better. First lightning round question, favorite vacation spot?
I'm going to have to say Italy because we've got a trip planned this summer.
Ooh, where are you going? What part of Italy?
A couple different parts. We're going to Rome, going to the Amalfi Coast, and we'll
Wow.
also be hitting Sicily too.
So we have two very young children, but I was talking to my wife about this last night, actually. We're like, let's plan a trip, and we can't take the kids. It would just kill us. But I think Italy will be where we go, and Amalfi Coast is high on the list. But this probably won't be for another year or so. I mean, when we
So
can
I'm on
actually
the
do
other
it.
end, Eric. This is my wife and I thought this is the last opportunity we have. We have one son who's in college. This is the last shot to do a family vacation. So that's what it is.
Well, I hope you guys enjoy it. Sounds beautiful. And I've heard the food is like nothing else in the whole world. So I hope you guys eat a lot and have a lot of gelato and just have a great trip. Um, Next question is, what is your favorite non-work related hobby?
I'd have to go with I'm kind of an athletic guy, so I like to do a lot of physical activity. Certainly do a lot of kind of weight training and that kind of stuff. But if I
Cool.
had to name one, I would say it would be mountain biking, which I do a lot.
Wow, very cool. I didn't know that about you. You big like power lifter or when you say weightlifting,
Yeah,
like
just training to try to stay in shape.
being
As you get older in age, right, you start realizing like I got to take care of the vehicle that I've got. So
I've actually probably so I'm 100 and I think 46 days or something. I've been counting calories, eating clean. I've lost 30 pounds, but lifting I didn't realize is a really important component of that because you need to preserve the muscle mass you have. Otherwise, when you're losing weight, you're losing like muscle and fat, which is really not the goal. So I've been doing a lot more powerlifting, so squats and RDLs and
there you go. Wow,
presses
that's
and
great.
rows and lats. Yeah, I
So
love it. It's a lot of fun.
what pushed you towards making a little bit of a change in life? It sounds like you made.
I've had this goal since I was in college. I've always wanted to be like in shape. I've always just been like a heavier kid, and I got a small frame, so no one ever realizes it except for me. But that was really the push, and I'm gonna do it, and like I've been doing it. So I do want to get you out of here on time. So I have one last question, and you mentioned you're athletic, and you also mentioned you played football for Villanova. So what position did you play? I wanted to know.
I played wide receiver. I was kind of the
Cool,
slot guy that did a lot of blocking, but
like a Wayne Corbett.
yeah, I guess so. Something along those lines.
No, I love it. That's awesome. I'm gonna try to look up some game footage. But with that, that's all the time we have for today. So do you have any parting words before I let you go here?
No, I just want to say I appreciate the invite, and I think it's great that you do these podcasts. For folks, I know as I was recounting my story about what I was going to do in life when I graduated college, like I didn't have the ability to look at some of these podcasts, right, and to get some insight. And I think it's great that you do this. So thank you for doing it.
No, thank you. And that's what I hope for. And I have heard from guests, so don't be surprised. Not a lot, but like, hey, I had two people reach out to me because I said something and it really stuck with them. Or I've had people, listeners, like reach out to me and just say like, that was such a great episode with so and so. I'm actually in the same life like decision that they were, and like their feedback helped me. So I appreciate that, and yeah, I hope people are getting something to take away from it. I learn a lot, and I appreciate everyone's time on it. So it's been amazing, amazing for me. But with that, please keep an eye out for our next episode, and we'll include any links to the resources we mentioned in the show notes. Thank you all for listening.
This episode is brought to you by Infinite Consulting Corp., your go-to firm for MBE certified project and construction management consulting. Discover how Infinite can help you build a better future at infiniteconsultingcorp.com.